Donald Trump has also announced that he will end aid to South Africa over alleged land seizures. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed a law that allows some land to be confiscated without compensation. Other African countries will also be affected by the US president's order to cut overseas aid to slash billions from the federal budget.
Donald Trump has turned his eyes to South Africa.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
Trump has threatened to cut off all funding to South Africa until an investigation into alleged land confiscation is carried out. Trump's threat comes after South African leaders introduced a law allowing the state to seize privately owned land or property for public use. South Africa rejects the allegation, saying the law is similar to ones other governments like the UK already have.
Because you passed an Exploration Act, therefore Trump will withhold funding to South Africa. And I said, let's not immobilize Africa. Let's withhold minerals to US. That is it. If they don't give us money, let's not give them minerals.
The new law allows for the state to take land without compensation under certain circumstances and if it serves the public's interest. Land ownership has long been a divisive issue in South Africa, where most private farmland is owned by white people who make up less than 8% of the population 3 decades after the end of apartheid. The Expropriation Act, South Africa says, is aimed at addressing this economic and racial inequality.
Let's pick up some of those points with Vincent Magwenya. He's a spokesperson to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and joins us from Johannesburg. Good to have you here. Welcome to DW. Will President Ramaphosa change course as a result of President Trump's threats?
No, we are a sovereign country. We're guided by its own constitution. We believe that the new, or rather the amended Expropriation Act is in line with our constitution, which does provide for the expropriation of land for public usage and in the public interest. And therefore, there is no need for us to change any course. We believe that the Trump administration and President Trump in particular have been misinformed about the intention of this act. They've also been misinformed about the true spirit of the act, which does, in accordance with the Constitution, provide safeguards for those property owners whose properties are targeted for expropriation. The Act provides a detailed process that has to be engaged, and it's not private property that the Act is talking about. It's unused land which can be utilized for public purposes. And the end of the process, the Act says, must be equitable and just. Therefore, there has been unnecessary fear-mongering from certain right-wing quarters out of South Africa that have deliberately distorted the intention of this Act and have been fear-mongering.
Except that we're talking about the President of the United States. So he has people, doesn't he? When you say he's been misinformed, let's talk about this fear-mongering. Who do you believe is misinforming him? Because why wouldn't he just... He said there's going to be an investigation. So do you think South Africa will actually be part of that investigation, or will you just let them get on with it and you do what you're doing?
Well, we don't know what that investigation will entail. We don't have the terms of reference of that investigation. Neither do we have any official communication of this directive that President Trump has issued. All we've seen is an announcement on X, as well as the clip that you've just shown on that news piece. And so we don't have the information, but you will have known by now, as a journalist from an outlet, a news outlet that has representation here in South Africa if there was any land being confiscated. South Africa has an independent judiciary. South Africa has an independent free media whose rights are guaranteed within our constitution. There is no way that if such was happening as falsely described by President Trump, will have not been known by the world and will have been kept under wraps.
You've made you've made your position quite clear on that. The president's been misinformed. But if he goes ahead with this threat, how much difference would this loss of US aid make?
Well, we're not dependent on aid with respect to funding our public programs. The largest funding...
Forgive me for interrupting, but no one's saying that. You're not dependent on it. My question is, how much difference would its loss make?
Well, I was explaining that the largest program is PEPFAR, which constitutes only 17% of our overall HIV/AIDS program. The remainder of that program is funded by the fiscus. Outside of PEPFAR, we don't have any significant aid programs that are funded by the US, and therefore it will not make that much difference as we speak. PEPFAR was suspended before this announcement was made, and adjustments are already being made to ensure that treatment to those patients is not interrupted in any manner.
OK. So today, Mr. Trump threatens to cut off all aid. Tomorrow, he may get rid of the preferential tariff system and perhaps even impose tariffs, accusing you of being too close to China. How does your government plan to navigate ties with the US over the next 4 years?
Any trade relationship is based on mutual benefits. There's no trade relationship that benefits a single party. The US has products, goods that it needs from South Africa. Similarly, we have products, goods and services that we require from the US. And therefore, we believe that any decision that could lead to such an extreme point will require some extensive consultation and engagement. We haven't had the opportunity to engage in detail with the Trump administration on issues of bilateral interest, as well as on issues of mutual concern. Right. Once that opportunity is available, we believe that the Trump administration will have a better appreciation of South Africa's position on a number of issues that may be of concern to them.
Thank you for joining us and outlining that so clearly. Vincent Magwenya, spokesperson to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more on this from our correspondent, Dianne Hawker in Johannesburg. Welcome, Dianne. Let's start with this land reform law that has so annoyed the American president.
Yes, well, the land reform law is actually called the expropriation bill, and it is a kind of legislation that other countries also have. It was signed into law earlier this year by President Cyril Ramaphosa. There have not been any confiscations of land, as US President Donald Trump has said. But what has happened is that the law has essentially been signed by the president and could come into effect in the near future. Now, what the law does say is that the state has the power to take or seize portions of land which it would do in the public interest or for public good. And it would have to go through a process of identifying that land and also motivating why it wants to take that land. There are also provisions in that legislation for the state to pay for the land. The issue that has caused some consternation here in South Africa and some anger is that part of the bill also speaks of the state being able to take some land for nil compensation. That would be from private property owners or from other organs of the state. And opposition party leaders, some of whom are also within the government of national unity, are concerned that there aren't enough provisions to protect land rights. However, there haven't been any confiscations.
And so what has been the reaction of the South African government to Mr. Trump's threats to blockade?
Well, the South African government is really trying to maintain good relations with the U.S. South Africa is a large trade partner of the U.S. It receives a number of goods and also sends quite a lot of goods to the U.S., particularly agricultural products as well as other goods. And in statements issued by the government today, it is said that it would like to explain things properly to the U.S. government and to engage with the Trump administration. However, one of the ministers in cabinet also said that if the U.S. government continues on this path, then South Africa could respond by withholding minerals. We also heard from the Democratic Alliance, which is the second biggest party within that coalition government, and they have said that there's a need to explain the misunderstanding that is currently unfolding, but that they would like to maintain these good relations with the U.S. government.
And so if President Trump follows through with his threat, what sort of impact would the suspension of U.S. aid have on South Africa?
Well, it would certainly affect a number of clinics that are offering HIV care as well as tuberculosis care. While the government does provide a lot of the medication, what we do know is that there is a portion of the budget that is essentially subsidized by these aid programs, and mainly that assists with the payment of some staff. The health minister said last week that it accounted for about 17% of the overall program. But considering that it pays for staff salaries, what it would mean is that there would be fewer people available in clinics to actually administer the care. And it is quite important to note, particularly with HIV medication, is that there needs to not be any disruption in the time frame of when a medication is given, and it needs to be as regular as possible to ensure that it works. So there is quite a lot of concern that people will be seeing this and might feel that they won't be able to access the care, and that it could affect the jobs of some of the people who are involved in those clinics across South Africa.
OK, thanks for that, Dianne. DW correspondent Dianne Walker in Johannesburg.